Hi, Philippe. Hi, Dennis.
Hello, guys.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next normal session. Nice wording, right? How to secure pharma companies in terms of regulation and management of personal data thanks to the best DCP security standards. Frankly speaking, I think this is a very intriguing and interesting theme because everything is about compliance, and when we unlock the whole digital transformation, multi-channel, omni-channel approaches, different kind of approaches. I think the first question was, are we compliant and are we regulated? So really pleased to welcome three extraordinary panelists. So from my left to right, hi, Yigal, Aviv from Pfizer. How are you?
Hello.
Philippe, Kirby, a very known guest. Hi, Philippe, how are you?
Good day, folks. Hi, Dario.
And Dennis from Viseven. Hi, Dennis, how are you?
Greetings, everyone. Doing great.
Indeed. So, gentlemen, let's kick off with this interesting meeting. And first of all, I would like to ask you, I would say first and foremost important question, which is how to establish a proper consent management mindset. Because as I said, this is actually the foundation to unlock the whole multi-channel, omni-channel, or whatsoever channel suite, right? Maybe we can start with you, Dennis.
All right. So speaking about mindset, so this is a broad topic, and I even prepared some slides to show. So if I can quickly share that with you, I think it would be easier for you to follow the main subject. Just tell me once you start seeing something.
Yes.
Okay, so as Dario has mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, so when people talk about consent, and especially gathering that consent, is what all people are thinking about is basically the compliance. Of course, there are things like GDPR, CCPA, and other properly local regulations that we need to follow. This is the main things that we focus on. Then diving deeper, there's also personal data management team, which is basically gathering that consent using the systems that help us to get that sort of web forms, CLMs, CRM systems, and others. Then there's also an important question about data flow and ownership, who's doing it on behalf of pharma, how we are treating that. Of course, there are questions of cybersecurity and data protection, because you cannot talk about compliance and consent gathering without those. And then there's also some other regulations that might help you out with this, like ISO 27001 and things like that. But oftentimes, the third key thing for me is really often overlooked, and that is user experience. Because first, we want to be compliant. Then we need to manage all the questions behind that compliance. But first thing for us should always be the user who we're talking about and the experience they are having in communicating with us. So talking about user experience, we would totally focus on opt-in forms, notification, and consent gathering in general. Then there are also topics of terms of use and privacy policies, transparency of data flow and ownership, because as an end user, I always want to know how are you working with my personal data, what are you doing to that, what I'm getting for it, and things like that. And of course, there are questions of data termination, like opt-out, unsubscribe, notifications, things like that. And don't forget about GDPR's right to be forgotten as a theme that basically influences user experience as well. So while we are talking about user experience and focusing on that, so this is how it usually happens right now. And this is where the mindset shift should happen. So right now, mostly all the consent gathering is happening during the face-to-face meeting of the sales rep with the HCP, where they ask this very question, like, are you willing to receive updates from us? And if HCP is willing to do so, this is what you get in as a result of that. So you get some personal data from the HCP stating his name, surname, his title, contact information, things like that. And then you have this huge tick stating that he's okay with receiving the updates from us. So after that, all of that gets into the CRM system, and there are these guys who are responsible for working with that system. This is the Salesforce, because they heavily use that information within the e-detailer channel. in order to plan their face-to-face visits, plan their activities, and that leads to more visits. And as a result of some of them, the HCP can receive the approved emails from the rep. Then, for some of you, this information is also transferred into the marketing automation system. And usually it is governed by the wholly different group of people, being the marketing or even contractors, subcontractors, or some sort of third parties who are working and doing that for you. And then they open the access for the HCP to additional channels like email, website, and events. So for emails, they are usually getting news, topic-specific campaigns, segment-specific updates, and things like that. And this drives us to the subject of broadcast emails. For websites, they are generally split into portals and information websites and solution and services. But all those websites, they usually generate a set of activity updates like digest newsletters, some personal deals, whatever, and all of that goes into the to the HCP. And for events, of course, like the Next Normal or any other type of the event, you receive the registration confirmation, reminders, follow-ups, record sharings, and feedback gathering, surveys, and things like that. So you see that HCP, by putting the single tick here in the beginning, they get a lot of traffic their way, and they not always can control what is getting to them and whether they want or they don't want to get it. And let's say at some stage on the broadcast email thread, the HCP is pressing the unsubscribe button in nowadays situation with the single channel policy and different people being responsible for different channels, it is difficult to transfer it back to the HCP record. So the mindset shift that should, in our opinion, happen here is to be something like that. So again, everything starts with the face-to-face visit, but instead of getting a single tick from the HCP that they are willing to get some sort of the communication with the company, they need to get the full detailed list of the stuff that you are offering as a service or some information or whatever. And here, this is basically like a menu for them where they can select what they want to get. So for example, if they are talking to the sales reps, they can select the face-to-face visits, and this information would go to the CRM system or content management system, depending on the infrastructure that you use. Basically, if they tick it, they can send this information to the CRM system, and then sales would be able to work with that information for the e-detailer channel. But let's say else like approved emails, and they can get it after the visit with the sales rep. If broadcast emails, this brings the whole integration with the marketing automation system and marketing and constructors who are responsible for it. And then you get your broadcast emails as a result of that. For solution and services, the same thing for websites and portals and info, again, the same stuff here. But you see what you get and what you sign up for. And then the event participation is the same stuff. If you want to participate in that, you select, and then you get the updates, notification, things like that. So in the ecosystem like this, first, your HCP already knows what you're offering, and they can select and expect some sort of communication from you, be it some of the channels that they select. And then it drives us to a next benefit. And again, this is a bit of a mindset shift here that should be powered by the technology, of course. So let's say the HCP at some stage, he clicks the unsubscribe for the broadcast emails. So now, instead of having a single checkbox towards his name, you can deactivate only broadcast emails for them, but still use the rest of the channels that he's comfortable with. And let's say at some moment, he can also unsubscribe from a solution or services that you provide using the website. This way, the system can be also updated, and you would be notified. And the important point here is also for us to remember is, let's say, if getting the information to the HCP is a point within the service perspective, then probably this person is no longer wants to receive those services, and this is the update for you as a service provider to think about it. And again, we need to diversify the way how we collect consent for different channels, and we need to provide the HCP with the transparency of what their data is used for, what channel should be engaged, and whether they are willing to be to use them. And also they would have the transparency of seeing what's behind each and every tick they put in this form here. So in such a way, this form becomes some sort of a traffic light for everyone who's working with the HCPs in your company. And by looking at this traffic light, you know whether you need to engage them in a proper way or the way that you would like to prefer. So hopefully it brings some images behind the words and the whole concept of the mindset switch for the consent gathering. And I will pass the word back to you.
Thank you, Dennis. Quite detailed, I would say. Philippe, is this the proper mindset and, of course, easy to be implemented in a typical pharma company?
Yeah, I think the first point that Dennis made around being able to balance compliance and user experience was a super important one. We had a similar type of approach where we have sort of a consent hub, let's call it that, as Dennis was just showing too, where you capture and manage all your consents. And then that has to be completely transparent to the customer as to exactly what it is you're capturing the consents for, what the purpose is going to be, and so on. When it comes to the UX, the challenge we had when we reframed everything was to say, if you look at the compliance side, you would say, I have to be exactly that, capture every single consent, be really clear about what it's used for, be transparent. At the same time, is there a way to simplify? So transparency is already going in the direction of UX, but at the same time, is there a way to simplify? So if we look at it as you and I, as just normal people who have to consent or manage our cookies or something like that, there's nothing we hate more than having something that is obscure or it's not clear on the options, or it kind of, you have to go and make multiple clicks before you can finally get to where you want to be. And so that's what I mean by simplification, is saying I'm transparent, but I also make it super easy to accept, reject, etc. We actually, in our consent approach, took out the accept all, reject all, because we were saying that's actually too easy. We want people to keep very simple, see the options and make a very conscious choice as to what they're doing and understand what we're proposing to them. So that's, one example of how I would say we took the approach to apply just what Dennis just showed us.
Thank you. Yigal?
In sake of time, I will try to be quick. In terms of the ideal world is what we just saw, that everything works as a cloud, everything is connected into one data warehouse. All the channels that we are capturing consents are gathering into one platform, but unfortunately, it's not always like that. And we have many channels, let's say, that are being collected consent and not always are being connected into one data warehouse. So I'll try to at least point a few issues that we need to consider in order to establish a consent mindset in the organization. First, we need to be transparent regarding the justification. Why the purpose of the consents? I mean, when we communicate this to the HCPs, including internally to the organization, we need to understand why we are collecting your private data in terms of the HCP. What are the functions that are played in this consent? We would like to keep you to keep contact with you, but what exactly we are collecting right now? Describing the categories of the individual's personal's data that we are collecting. If it's only the first name, last name, email, mobile phone, what exactly the license number? What exactly are we collecting? And we need to be transparent on that. Regarding third parties vendors, and we discussed this before, we need to be transparent and describe exactly to whom and to what platforms or services this information is passed. And we saw it, that it's critical to be transparent from the beginning, that those data might be transferred to third-party vendors. And we're not talking only CRM vendor, we are talking about SMS vendors, any other messaging platform vendors that we need to work with, not with the particular organization. We need to describe the retention period. The duration of the consent is, if it's clearly stated, how long it will be. We need to describe the communication channels that will be, such as Dennis just showed us. We need to get feedback about when and how this HCP would like to opt in. Okay, you can opt in. Here are the details in terms of how you communicate with us in case you would like to opt in. And of course, the idea of any data sets that is being captured, we need to be transparent regarding the database, where is located, where we are hosting those databases, the number, even the number of the database that is being registered. In terms of technical issues that we need to consider, is first the secured cloud, such as Dennis just showed. It needs to be multilingual. It needs to be fast and automatic in terms of the HCPs. The user experience, and we talked about this yesterday, user experience and customer experience needs to be shown also in the way that is filling out his details regarding those consents. The data fields needs to be aligned with the data provider. Many cases we saw that the HCPs fill out his details, but at the end, the data provider is not aligned with the details that is, so we couldn't recognize and do any authentication of these HCPs. We need to work as an offline and an online as well. And at the end, just the last issues is the one data warehouse. One data warehouse that needs to collect all the consents, all the opt-in, but most important, the opt-out. We cannot bear a way that any of those opt-out in the way in one of those channels and it's not being recognized immediately through the RTEs, through any emails that are being led. Those opt-out needs to be automatically updated in all channels.
Thank you, Yigal. During our preparation call, Philippe mentioned one very interesting topic, and this is for what actions and engagements we don't require consents.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and actually, in Dennis's slides, it calls out a little bit about events, for example. And one thing we really started looking into and making sure that we understand, especially from a GDPR perspective, is a nuance, which is promotional versus transactional. And for promotional purposes, absolutely, for sure, you need to have a consent, and you need to have a consent for each one of the channels you use for promotional purposes. And you need to describe exactly how that channel is going to be used for what promotional purpose. So again, the transparency and the usage of that particular promotional channel. On a transactional side, there, if you can demonstrate that you are not using it for promotional purposes, you do not necessarily need a consent. And so what we're looking into, for example, is for an event, you've actually have somebody who's registered for a virtual event. When you send them back the confirmation that they've attended, that is a transactional email. You could also send them a reminder a couple of days before the event, and it could be via email, it could be via text message, saying, hey, this event's coming up in 1 hour. So we need to be really clear on what we call the legitimate purpose of the actual communication with the customer, and then from there be able to determine the difference between transactional and promotional. And so one thing here is we've learned from that is we have to be careful not to be holier than the Pope when it comes to trying to apply the consent management side of things, and use some better judgment as to, are there some things we could do just much easier without consent, and then actually will make it convenient for the customer as well as help us and being able to constantly communicate with them and give them a good experience.
Thank you, Philippe. Dennis, from your perspective as a solution vendor, for what we don't require the consents?
So continuing Philippe's point on properly defining what you're going to be proposing after you get that consent is, I would generally talk that you don't need a consent for things that are clearly stated in your terms of use or policies. So the question to the general public is like, what was the last time when you checked on the policies that you have or that you are referencing to? But basically, imagine you being a provider of the some sort of service. So if you're in the terms of services, you clearly define that, for example, by taking the education resource, you agree to getting some, let's say, surveys for us to know whether you are satisfied with our service. Or let's say you agree to getting some email notification about the upcoming events. By the time you put that consent checkbox, let's put it this way, when you are applying for a service, you already agree with the fact that you're going to get that sort of the communication through a particular channel. And by the time it comes to you, it's not a surprise for you as an end user why I'm getting this email, because you purposely put a checkbox there. So whatever is defined and clearly described in your terms of services or privacy policy or any other sort of policies that you have, for that you don't have the consent, because the people you are communicating with, they have already agreed to get that sort of communication. For other than that, you would need to, you are likely to need to get that consent.
Thank you. Yigal?
Nothing to add. I think it's clearly described.
All clear. Last but not least, what might be the best consent security standard protocol? I think that Dennis definitely presented it in a very...
We'll defer to Dennis.
Exactly. You can maybe repeat that presentation once more. Just kidding. But let's start this time with you, Yigal. I mean, what is the best security protocol when we speak about the consent management? Maybe also one issue which I know is that there is no centralized solution which is storing all consents. And I think this is definitely very crucial to have.
Yeah, so for instance, we don't want to perceive as a spammer company. We don't want to perceive as a spammer industry. The idea is first, not only centralize the, let's say, the technical issues of this aspect, but also centralize the operation of those communication, meaning that as a level of organization, we need to set such as 1 email per week, cross-functional, 1 SMS per week, 2 SMS per week, 1 system or 1 operative team that needs to allocate and as kind of a calendar in terms of the HCPs that's being exposed to our messages. There is a need to have 1 cross-functional team or any operational idea that will operate this. Other aspects in terms of technical issues, like I said, fast and automatic, data fields needs to be aligned, encrypted data. I mean, we need those HCPs data needs to come as encrypted data and then to be minded and to work on those data. In terms of any other behaviors, we need to have those retention period. We need to work with those third parties. And we need to explain why we are collecting those data. And at the end, once we have what's in it for me in terms of the HCP and what it's in it for me from in terms of the pharma, we can incorporate this change management at the best way.
Thank you, Yigal. Dennis?
Basically, to sum it up, I that there are no people who haven't heard about the GDPR, so that's going to be definitely a best reference point. Also, the ISO 27001, because you also have some requirements and recommendations. Check with that. So that would be a standard for you to start out. And then, of course, your digital content factory, because digital content factories, they are not all about like doing the global to local content distribution for you or speeding up your MLR process. They can also help you with updating the CRM system or any other systems that you work with in order to get that consent properly and to change the mindset and the way how your system works for you in the way that you are getting the events and updates from people that someone has opted out, and now you need to think of other ways how you can communicate with that. So all of that is basically on the architecture level, I would say, and you need to revise that as well. For that, some respectful service provider might help you out with, and we also work with a number of our customers doing just like that.
Thank you. Philippe?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that to take into account is exactly what Dennis said, GDPR. our security measures, or we have a GDPR expertise internally. So I have a GDPR expert that I go and I refer to when I need to have some sort of interpretation of the regulation. So that super important. And since it's pretty comprehensive, what we've done is we pretty much apply GDPR regulations globally, not only in Europe. So GDPR is mainly for Europe, but we're saying since so many countries are following suit, we first make sure we apply everything that we do in Europe, but then we continue and deploy that on a global scale. The second thing I think that is important is then, how you actually manage and apply with the technology, as Dennis was referring to. And I mentioned a consent hub a little bit earlier. So we've actually invested in making sure that we have very good integration between our different customer engagement systems, whether it be the face-to-face side with CRM or digital with a marketing automation capability, and make sure that consents and opt-outs, as was also called out, flow back and forth very quickly, right? Real time between the different consuming systems. So an opt-in that comes in, yes, it can be used potentially in another part of the system, but the same thing when an opt-out comes in, it needs to be immediately applied across the board so that you're not seen to be spamming the customer or not applying the regulations. I think the final thing that I would say that's important is a couple of years ago, Fjord, I don't know if you know the company, they're an affiliate of Accenture. They come out with these trends every year. They just came out with their 2021 trends not too long ago. They came out with a concept called data minimization. And what data minimization is about is exactly, I think Dennis talked a little bit to that, is gathering, or maybe it was you, Yigal, gathering only the data you need from a customer. So when you register and you start getting certain attributes of customers and you're using that and you're saying that your purpose is for personalization, it better well be for personalization. You need to be able to prove that you're actually using the data and that it is returning value to the customer. And I think that's the ultimate thing, is that if the customer can get this feeling that the data that they're giving to you is helping you give them a better customer experience in return because you're able to personalize, you're able to meet a need and really add value, then that's going to work really well.
Definitely. Thank you very much for these final thoughts. For sure, interesting. If I may sum it up, I would say that the next level of consent management or regulation is definitely going to user experience as well, or customer experience. I think that's the next normal in absolutely every segment what we do, and we definitely have to learn a lot. But in any case, compared to other industries, at least user experience is much better, right? Because we really put a lot of effort on that. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure. We are running to the next session. Once again, take a break and hope to see you on the next sessions as well. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your time, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.